Traitors! You lost before you even started.
The moving truck in my driveway looked like a hearse. Black, imposing, and here to carry away everything I'd built over 15 years of marriage. I stood on my own front porch, keys useless in my hand, watching strangers box up my life. You can't be serious, Beth. My voice came out steadier than I felt. 20 years in the military teaches you to keep your cool when the world's exploding around you. My wife didn't look up from her clipboard. Beth Parrish had always been beautiful in that sharp, angular way that made men stupid and women jealous. Today she looked like a corporate executioner in her tailored black suit. Dead serious, Jim. The papers are on the kitchen counter. My lawyer says you have 30 days to contest, but honestly, don't bother. She finally met my eyes, and I saw nothing there. No regret, no sadness, not even anger. Just cold calculation. 15 years, Beth, our daughters, the business we built together. I gestured at the chaos around us. This is how it ends, with hired muscle and legal documents? She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The business? You mean the electrical contracting firm that my family's money saved from bankruptcy 3 times? The one where my brother John actually runs operations while you play with your little drone toys in the back office? That stung because it held just enough truth to hurt. I was the technical guy, the one who'd modernized Parrish Electric from a mom-and-pop shop into a $1 million operation. But John Tate, Beth's older brother, was the face everyone saw. The glad-handing, back-slapping golden boy who closed deals and played golf with city contractors. "Where are Emma and Sarah?" I asked, noticing the house felt too quiet. "Safe. That's all you need to know right now." "Safe from what? Their father?" Beth's mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something ugly underneath. "Safe from whatever you might do when you realize how badly you've lost." One of the movers, a thick-necked guy with prison tattoos, stepped closer. "Ma'am, we're about done here. You want us to wait while you finish up?" "No need, Tony. Mr. Parrish was just leaving." Beth turned back to me. "Your personal items are in boxes by the garage. Everything else stays." "Everything else?" "Beth, I bought that couch. I installed every light fixture in this house. I built the deck where we had Emma's birthday party last month. And now it's mine. Community property laws are fascinating when you actually read them." She pulled out her phone and started typing. "I'd suggest you find a hotel, or maybe your sister Connie has a spare room above that sad little apartment she calls home." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a slap. This wasn't grief or anger talking. This was planned, calculated. Military precision applied to destroying a life. "You've been planning this for months, haven't you?" "Longer." Beth smiled, and it was the first genuine expression I'd seen from her all day. "You always were too trusting, Jim. Too focused on your circuits and voltage meters to notice what was happening right in front of you." I thought about the late nights she'd claimed to spend at her book club, the weekend trips to visit her college roommate in Seattle, the way she'd started dressing differently, wearing perfume I didn't recognize. There's someone else. There's always been someone else. You were just too boring to notice. The moving truck rumbled to life, belching diesel smoke across my carefully maintained lawn. My lawn. At least until the lawyers finished dividing everything up. "I want to see my daughters." "You'll see them when the court says you can see them. My lawyer thinks supervised visitation is appropriate, given your military background and potential for violence." "Potential for violence?" "Beth, I fixed air conditioners and installed security systems for 20 years. The most violent thing I've done lately is argue with you about whose turn it was to take out the garbage. That's not how I remember it, or how my witnesses will remember it." The word witnesses sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a campaign, complete with battle plans and propaganda. "Who is he?" Beth checked her watch, an expensive Rolex I didn't remember buying her. "I have a meeting. Tony will make sure you get your boxes." She walked toward a silver BMW parked at the curb. Also new. Also not something we could afford on our legitimate income. "Beth!" My voice stopped her at the car door. "This isn't over." "Yes, Jim. It really is." She slid into the driver's seat with practiced grace. "Oh, and don't bother coming to the office tomorrow. John's handling your transition out of the company. Something about irregularities in your expense reports." The BMW purred away, leaving me standing in the driveway of a house I could no longer enter, next to boxes containing the remnants of my life. Tony the mover handed me a clipboard. Need you to sign off that we delivered your stuff intact. I looked at the boxes. Clothes, some books, my military commendations, a few tools. 15 years reduced to what could fit in the back of a pickup truck. Intact, I repeated. Sure, everything's perfectly intact. But as I signed the paperwork, my mind was already working. Beth had made one crucial mistake in her perfectly planned ambush. She'd forgotten that I wasn't just some suburban dad who fixed electrical problems for a living. Before I became James Parrish, reliable electrician and devoted family man, I'd been Staff Sergeant James Parrish, drone operator extraordinaire. My call sign had been Reaper Zero, and I'd spent 5 years tracking targets across 3 continents. I knew how to watch, how to wait, and how to strike when the moment was right. Beth wanted to play war games? Fine. But she'd forgotten one important rule about warfare. Always know your enemy's capabilities before you attack. I pulled out my phone and dialed my sister Connie. Jim, what's wrong? You sound terrible. I need a place to stay. And Connie? I think it's time you knew what really happened during my last deployment. Connie's apartment smelled like coffee and disappointment. She'd been divorced for 3 years, worked as a bookkeeper for small businesses, and lived in a converted warehouse that she'd tried to make homey with plants and vintage furniture. It wasn't much, but it was honest. More honest than anything I'd been living for the past year. So Beth just threw you out? No warning? No discussion? Connie poured me a cup of coffee strong enough to strip paint. She'd always been the practical one in the family, the one who saw through people's BS with surgical precision. Oh, there was plenty of warning. I was just too stupid to read the signs. I showed her the divorce papers. Look at this. She's claiming emotional abandonment, financial irresponsibility, and behavior inconsistent with the marriage contract. What the hell does that even mean? Connie scanned the documents, her accountant's eye catching details I'd missed. This is expensive legal work, the kind that costs more than you two make in 6 months. Where'd she get the money? Good question. Along with where she got the BMW, the Rolex, and the confidence to destroy my life without breaking a sweat. You think she's been stealing from the business? I'd been wondering the same thing. Parrish Electric was technically a family business, but the family was Beth's, not mine. Her father, Admiral Carson Tate, had provided the startup capital 15 years ago. Her brother John held 40% of the shares. I had 30%, and Beth had 30%. On paper, I was a minority partner in my own company. I think a lot of things, but thinking and proving are different animals. Connie set down her coffee cup with a decisive click. So we prove it. You still have access to the company accounts? For now. But Beth said John's handling my transition out of the business. That probably means I'll be locked out by tomorrow. Then we better work fast. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in months. Connie was 5 years younger than me, but she had our father's stubborn jaw and our mother's sharp intelligence. She'd been keeping books for 20 years, and she could spot financial irregularities like a bloodhound smelling fear. This could get messy, Con. If Beth's been planning this as long as she claims, she's probably covered her tracks pretty well. Maybe, but she's not an accountant, and neither is John. Rich boys who've never had to balance their own checkbooks make predictable mistakes. We drove to the Parrish Electric offices in Connie's beat-up Honda. The building was a converted auto shop on the industrial side of town. Nothing fancy but functional. I'd always liked it because it felt real. No corporate BS, no marble lobbies, just honest work and the smell of electrical components. Joanne Reeves looked up from her desk when we walked in. She'd been the office manager for 8 years, a middle-aged woman with steel gray hair and the organizational skills of a Pentagon logistics officer. More importantly, she'd never liked Beth. Jim, thank God you're here. John came in this morning talking about restructuring and efficiency improvements. He's been in your office for 2 hours going through your files. My files? What's he looking for? I don't know, but he brought that lawyer with him. The slimy one who looks like he'd sell his mother for billable hours, Amir Khalil. Beth's divorce attorney apparently moonlighting as corporate counsel. That was interesting. Divorce lawyers don't usually handle business restructuring unless there's overlap between the two cases. Joanne, I need you to print out the financial records for the past 18 months. All of them. Bank statements, expense reports, payroll records, everything. She glanced toward my office, where I could see John's silhouette through the frosted glass. He said you weren't supposed to have access to confidential company information anymore. Joanne, whose name is on the incorporation papers? Yours and Beth's. And who signs your paychecks? You do. Then print the damn records. While Joanne worked her magic with the filing cabinets, I walked toward my office. The door was closed, but I could hear voices inside. John's booming laugh and Amir's nasal whine. I didn't knock. Gentlemen, lovely morning, isn't it? John Tate looked up from my desk with the expression of a man caught stealing cookies. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy charm that made people want to buy him drinks and vote for him for mayor. He'd been a Marine like his father, but his service had been stateside. No deployments, no combat, just 4 years of playing soldier at Camp Pendleton. Jim, I was hoping we could talk. Amir here thinks there might be some irregularities in your expense accounts. Amir Khalil was a thin, nervous man who wore expensive suits to compensate for his complete lack of physical presence. He had the kind of weak handshake that made you want to wash your hands afterward. Irregularities? Like what? Well, for instance, this drone equipment you've been purchasing. Seems excessive for a small electrical contracting firm. I looked at the invoices spread across my desk. All legitimate. All for equipment I'd used to inspect power lines and survey job sites. The kind of technological innovation that had helped Parish Electric win contracts against bigger competitors. That equipment has saved us thousands in labor costs. We can survey a commercial site in 2 hours instead of 2 days. Maybe so, but it's also expensive. And some of these purchases seem personal. Amir held up an invoice for a high-end camera drone. This model has military-grade surveillance capabilities. Why would an electrician need that? Because an electrician who used to be a drone operator knows the difference between consumer toys and professional tools. But I didn't say that. For documenting installations and safety compliance. Would you prefer we go back to sending guys up 40-foot poles with Polaroid cameras? John stood up, trying to use his height advantage. Look, Jim, nobody's accusing you of anything. We're just trying to understand some discrepancies before the auditors get involved. Auditors? Standard procedure during ownership transitions. We want everything clean and transparent. Ownership transitions? You mean while you're stealing my company? John's fake smile never wavered. Nobody's stealing anything. But with your personal situation changing, it makes sense to restructure the business relationship. Amir's drawn up some papers that would transfer your shares to a trust, with Beth and me as trustees. Very clean, very fair. Fair, right. I picked up one of the invoices, a bill for electrical components we'd used on a school renovation project. John, what's the difference between 14-gauge and 12-gauge wire? What? Basic electrical question. You've been in this business for 15 years. Surely you know the difference. John glanced at Amir, who was no help. Look, Jim, I handle the business side. You handle the technical stuff. That's how it's always worked. Right. I handle the technical stuff. I design the systems, I train the crews, I solve the problems that keep us from getting sued. And you handle the business side, which apparently means stealing money and screwing my wife. The words hung in the air like ozone after a lightning strike. John's face went red, then white, then red again. What did you just say? You heard me. Question is, how long has it been going on? The affair, I mean. The theft I can probably figure out from the financial records. Amir started gathering papers. I think this meeting is over. John, we should go. But John wasn't moving. He was staring at me with the kind of rage that comes from being called out on something you thought was secret. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Beth's got a new car she can't afford, new jewelry, and the confidence of a woman who knows she's got backup. You've been taking long lunches and mysterious weekend trips. And somehow, my wife knew exactly how to destroy my life with military precision. Funny thing about precision, John, it usually comes from intelligence. Good intelligence. You're paranoid. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally paying attention. I walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. John was bigger than me, but size doesn't matter when you know what you're doing. And I could see in his eyes that he knew I knew what I was doing. Here's what's going to happen, John. You're going to get out of my office, and you're going to stop going through my files. Then you're going to explain to me why my wife has expensive things we can't afford, and why she's so confident about destroying my life. Or what? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Or I'll start asking those questions publicly, at the Rotary Club meeting next week, at the Chamber of Commerce mixer, At Murphy's Bar, where half our subcontractors drink after work. John's face went pale. In a small town, reputation is everything. Whispers about financial impropriety could eliminate a business faster than a bad safety record. You wouldn't. Try me. Amir tugged at John's sleeve. We should go, now. They left, but John paused at the door. This isn't over, Jim. No, I agreed. It's really not. After they were gone, Joanne appeared with a box of printed financial records. Everything you asked for. And Jim, I've been doing some thinking about those expense irregularities they mentioned. Yeah? Funny thing about irregularities. Sometimes they're not where people think they are. She handed me a folder. John's been signing a lot of checks lately. For supplies, contractor payments, equipment rentals, all legitimate on the surface. I opened the folder and saw what she meant. The amounts were reasonable, the vendors were real, but the timing was suspicious. Large payments going out just before Beth's expensive purchases. How long has this been going on? About 8 months, right around the time John started staying late to catch up on paperwork. 8 months. That matched the timeline of Beth's behavior changes, the new clothes, the mysterious phone calls, the way she'd started treating me like a stranger in my own house. Joanne, I need you to do something for me, and it might get complicated. More complicated than watching this place get looted by people who don't know a circuit breaker from a coffee maker? Fair point. I need copies of everything. Bank records, vendor contracts, payroll information, insurance policies, everything. And I need them somewhere safe, where John and his lawyer can't get to them. Consider it done. But Jim, what are you planning? I looked out the window at the city I'd called home for 15 years. The place where I'd built a business, raised my daughters, and thought I'd found peace after the war. I'm planning to find out the truth, and then I'm planning to do something about it. Murphy's Tavern hadn't changed in 20 years. Same scarred wooden bar, same neon beer signs, same smell of cigarettes and broken dreams. It was the kind of place where blue-collar workers came to complain about their bosses and argue about football. More importantly, it was where information flowed like cheap whiskey. I'd been coming here twice a week for 3 months, nursing beers and listening to the gossip. Tonight felt different. Tonight, I was ready to start some gossip of my own. Jim, heard you're going through some rough times. Tommy Kozlowski, a plumber who'd worked on several parish electric jobs, slapped me on the shoulder with genuine sympathy. Divorce is a witch, man. My ex took half of everything and then complained it wasn't enough. Yeah, well, Beth's certainly being thorough about it. I heard she's got herself a fancy lawyer, the kind that charges more per hour than we make in a day. Funny thing about fancy lawyers, Tommy. Someone's got to pay for them. I let that hang in the air while I took a sip of beer. Tommy was a gossip, but he wasn't stupid. He'd connect the dots. You saying she's been skimming from the business? I'm not saying anything, but I am wondering how a woman who complained about grocery bills 6 months ago can suddenly afford a BMW and a Rolex. Tommy's eyes lit up. This was prime gossip material, the kind of story that would be all over the construction community by morning. No crap? She's been stealing? I didn't say that, but I did notice some interesting patterns in our expense reports. Large payments to vendors, followed by mysterious cash flow problems. That's screwed up, man. I mean, it's one thing to divorce a guy, but stealing from the business, that affects everyone who works for you. Exactly. I'd been counting on Tommy's sense of working-class solidarity. Steal from your husband, that's personal. Steal from the business, that's stealing from every electrician, plumber, and contractor who depends on parish electric for work. Like I said, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, just noticing patterns. I finished my beer and left, knowing that Tommy would spend the rest of the evening sharing his concerns about Parish Electric's financial stability. By tomorrow, half the trades in town would be wondering if their invoices were going to get paid. The next morning, I got a call from John. What the hell do you think you're doing? Good morning to you too, John. I'm having coffee and reading the newspaper. How's your morning going? Cut the crap, Jim. I've had 6 subcontractors call me this morning asking about our financial situation. Someone's been spreading rumors. Rumors? That's terrible. What kind of rumors? You know damn well what kind. About missing money and unpaid bills. Huh. Well, if people are worried about unpaid bills, maybe we should make sure all our accounts are in order. You know, transparency and all that. There was a long pause. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me at the office in an hour. Will Amir be there? This is between you and me? Good. I prefer family meetings to stay in the family. I hung up and smiled. John was rattled, which meant the pressure was working, but I wasn't done yet. I drove to the office, but instead of going inside, I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, a silver BMW pulled into the lot. Beth got out, looking tense and angry. She was followed by Amir, carrying his briefcase like a shield. So much for keeping it in the family. I waited another 10 minutes, then walked in. Joanne looked up from her desk with barely concealed excitement. They're all in the conference room. And Jim, they've been arguing for the past 15 minutes. Arguing about what? I couldn't hear everything, but I definitely heard the words exposure, liability, and damage control. Perfect. I walked into the conference room without knocking. Beth, John, and Amir were huddled around the table like conspirators planning a coup, which I suppose they were. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was homicide. Beth looked up with pure venom in her eyes. You fool! You're trying to destroy the business out of spite. Destroy the business? I built this business. You're the ones trying to steal it. We're not stealing anything, John said. We're protecting our investment. Your investment, right? I sat down across from them, making myself comfortable. Let's talk about investments, John, like the investment you made in that new truck last month, the one that somehow got paid for with a parish electric check. John's face went red. That truck is used for business purposes. Really? Because according to the registration, it's titled in your personal name. And according to the insurance, it's for personal use only. Amir cleared his throat. Mr. Parrish, these are internal business matters that should be resolved through proper channels. You mean like divorce court, where all our financial records will become public documents? That got their attention. In a small town, public divorce records were like newspaper headlines. Everyone would know exactly how much money was involved and where it had gone. You wouldn't, Beth said. Wouldn't what? Tell the truth under oath? Provide accurate financial records to the court? Why would I hide anything, Beth? I'm not the one with expensive new toys I can't explain. I pulled out a folder and spread some papers on the table. Bank statements, canceled checks, vendor invoices, all perfectly legal, all obtained through my legitimate access to company records. Here's an interesting pattern. Large payments to Cascade Construction Supply, followed by returns of unused materials. But the refund checks don't come back to Parish Electric. They go to a personal account. John grabbed for the papers, but I was faster. Whose account, John? Those are private financial records. No, those are Parish Electric financial records, which makes them my business since I'm still a 30% owner. Beth stood up abruptly. This is harassment. This is bookkeeping. But if you want to talk about harassment, let's discuss how you've been poisoning my daughters against me. Emma asked me last week why Mommy says I'm a bad man who might hurt people. You are a bad man, Beth snapped. You're vindictive and dangerous, and I won't let you destroy everything we've built. Everything we've built? Beth, 6 months ago you couldn't balance a checkbook. Now you're an expert in corporate restructuring and asset protection? Someone's been teaching you some interesting skills. I looked directly at John. Someone with experience in business management and a vested interest in keeping certain financial arrangements quiet. Amir started packing his briefcase. I think this meeting has become counterproductive. Oh, we're just getting started. See, I've been doing some research on asset protection strategies. Fascinating stuff. Did you know that if someone's been systematically moving money from a business to personal accounts, it can be considered embezzlement? Even if they're part owners of the business? You can't prove anything, John said. Can I? Because I've got 18 months of financial records, and they tell a pretty clear story. Money goes out of Parish Electric. Money shows up in personal accounts. Expensive purchases follow. It's like connect the dots, but with felonies. Beth was shaking now, with rage or fear. I couldn't tell which. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell you what, let's find out. I'll take all these records to the district attorney's office and let them decide if there's a case. I'm sure they'd be very interested in a systematic pattern of financial irregularities at a company that holds municipal contracts. That was the eliminate shot. Parish Electric did electrical work for the city, the county, and the school district. Any hint of financial impropriety would trigger audits, investigations, and the loss of public contracts. It would destroy the business completely. You'd destroy your own company? John asked. My company? John, you just spent an hour explaining how this isn't my company anymore. How you and Beth are the real owners, and I'm just a technical employee who needs to be managed out. I stood up and gathered my papers. So here's my offer. Full financial disclosure, complete transparency, and an honest accounting of where every penny has gone. Or I take this to the authorities and let them sort it out. And if we agree, Beth asked, then we'll see. Maybe we can work something out, maybe we can't. But at least we'll be dealing with the truth instead of this elaborate fiction you've constructed. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Beth, next time you want to teach our daughters that Daddy's a bad man, you might want to make sure Daddy doesn't have 18 months of canceled checks showing where Mommy's been spending the grocery money. I left them sitting there, 3 conspirators whose conspiracy had just been exposed to daylight. It felt good, but I knew this was just the beginning. They'd regroup, they'd plan, and they'd come back harder. But that was fine. I'd been planning too, and I had advantages they didn't know about. 20 years in the military teaches you patience, strategy, and the importance of knowing your enemy's capabilities. More importantly, it teaches you that the best defense is a devastating offense. And I was just getting started. 3 days later, my phone rang at 2 a.m. The display showed Parish Electric Security, which meant someone had triggered the motion sensors at our warehouse. I'd installed that system myself, using military-grade equipment that could distinguish between a stray cat and a human intruder. Someone was in the building, and they weren't supposed to be there. I threw on clothes and drove across town, but I didn't go straight to the warehouse. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using the shadows and my old reconnaissance training. The building looked dark from the outside, but there was a faint glow coming from the office windows. Someone was inside with a flashlight, going through files. I circled the building and found John's truck parked in the alley behind the loading dock. The same truck that Parish Electric had mysteriously paid for, now being used to commit what was technically breaking and entering. I pulled out my phone and activated an app I'd installed 3 months ago. The screen showed a bird's-eye view of the warehouse, courtesy of a small surveillance drone I'd hidden on the roof, military surplus, completely legal and invisible from the ground. Through the drone's camera, I could see John moving around inside the office, pulling files from cabinets and stuffing them into garbage bags. He was destroying evidence, which meant he knew exactly how damaging that evidence was. I had 2 choices: call the police and let them handle it, or handle it myself. The first option was safer and more legal. The second option would be more satisfying and probably more effective. I chose option 2. The warehouse had 3 entrances: the main door, the loading dock, and a service entrance that most people forgot about. I'd installed electronic locks on all 3, controlled by a master system that I'd designed myself. I pulled out my phone and accessed the building's security system. A few taps on the screen, and all 3 doors locked with an audible click that echoed through the building. John was trapped inside, and he knew it. I heard him try the main door, then the loading dock, then the service entrance. Each time, the electronic lock held firm. Through the drone camera, I could see him pulling out his phone, probably calling Beth or Amir. But cell phone reception inside the warehouse was terrible, thanks to the metal construction and the signal-blocking equipment I'd installed to protect our electronic inventory from interference. John was alone in the dark with no way out and no way to call for help. I activated the building's PA system and spoke into my phone. "Good evening, John. Working late tonight?" His voice echoed through the empty building. Jim, let me out of here." "I don't think so. See, you're trespassing on private property, destroying company documents, and probably committing several felonies. I think we should have a conversation about that. This is kidnapping, false imprisonment. Actually, it's a citizen's arrest. I'm detaining a suspected criminal until the authorities arrive. Very legal, very proper." That was a lie, but John didn't know enough about the law to argue. "What do you want?" "I want the truth. All of it. How long have you been stealing from the company? How long have you been sleeping with my wife? And what exactly were you planning to do with those documents?" Through the drone camera, I could see John looking around frantically, trying to find a way out. But I designed this building's security system myself, and I designed it well. "I'm not saying anything without a lawyer." "That's your right. Of course, lawyers are expensive, and I imagine your legal bills are getting pretty steep. Between Beth's divorce attorney and your own criminal defense, you're probably looking at 6 figures in legal fees." I paused to let that sink in. "Of course, if you were to cooperate, if you were to provide full financial disclosure and return the money you've stolen, we might be able to work something out. Privately, without involving the criminal justice system." You can't prove I stole anything. Can I? John, I've got 18 months of financial records showing systematic diversion of company funds. I've got bank statements showing unexplained deposits into your personal accounts. I've got receipts for expensive purchases that coincide exactly with those deposits. I activated the warehouse's overhead lights, flooding the building with harsh fluorescent illumination. John squinted and shielded his eyes, looking like a deer caught in headlights. More importantly, I've got you on video, right now. Destroying evidence. That's obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and probably a few other felonies I can't remember off the top of my head. Through the PA system, I could hear John breathing heavily. He was scared, which was exactly where I wanted him. What do you want? I want my company back. I want my money back. And I want you and Beth to disappear from my life permanently. And if I don't agree, then I call the police, press charges, and let the criminal justice system sort it out. Your choice, John. Cooperation or incarceration. There was a long silence. Through the drone camera, I could see John weighing his options. He was trapped, literally and figuratively, with no good choices left. If I cooperate, what guarantee do I have that you won't press charges anyway? You don't. But you do have my word that if you make full restitution and disappear quietly, I won't actively pursue criminal charges. I can't speak for the IRS or the state tax authority, but that's your problem, not mine. Another long pause. I need time to think. You've got 5 minutes. Then I'm calling the police and letting them sort it out. I started counting down from 300, broadcasting the countdown over the PA system. It was psychological warfare, pure and simple, designed to increase pressure and force a quick decision. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, John broke. Okay, I'll cooperate. Just let me out of here. First, put down those garbage bags and step away from the files. I watched through the drone camera as John complied. Good. Now, let's talk numbers. How much money have you and Beth stolen from Parish Electric? It wasn't stealing. We were protecting our investment. How much, John? About 200,000 over 18 months. $200,000. More than I'd suspected. Enough to constitute grand theft in any jurisdiction. Where's the money now? Some of it went to Beth's legal fees. Some went to personal expenses. The BMW, the jewelry, the fancy lawyer? Yes. And the rest? Offshore accounts, Cayman Islands. Beth's idea. Of course it was. Beth had always been smarter than John, more calculating. She'd probably been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. I want account numbers, passwords, everything. Full access. I can't do that. Beth controls those accounts. Then you better convince Beth to cooperate. Because in about 2 minutes, I'm going to unlock these doors and call the police. Your choice. I could see John pulling out his phone, trying to get a signal. The metal walls of the warehouse made reception spotty, but he finally managed to connect. Beth, it's me. I'm in trouble. Jim's got me trapped in the warehouse, and he knows about the money. I couldn't hear Beth's side of the conversation, but I could see John's face getting paler with each word. She wants to talk to you, he said finally. Put her on speaker. Beth's voice crackled through the PA system, distorted but recognizable. Jim, you fool, let him go. Hello, Beth. Lovely evening, isn't it? I was just having a conversation with John about financial irregularities and embezzlement. Very educational. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. I've got John on video destroying evidence, which is a felony. I've got financial records showing systematic theft, which is another felony. And now I've got John's confession recorded through this PA system, which ties it all together nicely. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell you what, let's find out. I'll release the recordings to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning, along with all the financial evidence. I'm sure they'll be very interested. There was a long pause. Then Beth's voice came back, colder and more calculating than before. What do you want? Full restitution, complete financial disclosure, and both of you out of my life permanently. And in return, I don't press criminal charges. This stays a civil matter, handled through divorce court and business dissolution. That's not much of a deal. It's better than 20 years in federal prison for embezzlement and money laundering, which is what you're looking at if this goes criminal. Another pause, longer this time. I need guarantees. You're not in a position to negotiate guarantees, Beth. You're in a position to accept my offer or face the consequences. Fine, we'll cooperate. But I want everything in writing, signed by both parties. Agreed. But first, I want those offshore account numbers. Tonight. I'll need time to gather the information. You've got 24 hours. After that, I go to the authorities with what I have. I ended the call and unlocked the warehouse doors. John stumbled out into the alley, looking like a man who'd just seen his life collapse around him. "John," I called after him, "next time you want to destroy evidence, you might want to make sure you're not being watched." He didn't answer, just got in his truck and drove away into the night. I stood in the empty warehouse, surrounded by the tools and equipment I'd used to build Parish Electric into a successful business. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built had been systematically looted by the people I'd trusted most. But now I had them, dead to rights, with evidence that would stand up in any court. The question was what to do with that advantage. I could destroy them completely, send them to prison, and reclaim everything they'd stolen. It would be justice, pure and simple. Or I could be more creative, more strategic, more devastating. After all, sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. Sometimes it's making sure your enemies know exactly how badly they've lost, and exactly why they'll never recover. I was beginning to think that Beth and John deserved something more creative than simple justice. They deserved a masterpiece. The Riverside Motel wasn't the kind of place you'd choose for a business meeting, unless your business involved things that couldn't be discussed in respectable establishments. It was the perfect location for what I'd planned. I'd rented the conference room for the day, a shabby space with water-stained ceiling tiles and the lingering smell of cigarettes and desperation. But it had one crucial advantage. The adjoining room shared a ventilation system, which meant every word spoken in the conference room could be heard clearly from next door. Connie arrived first, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of serious expression that made people think twice about lying to her. She'd been working around the clock for the past week, analyzing financial records and preparing documentation that would make Beth and John's theft impossible to deny. "You sure about this, Jim? Once we spring this trap, there's no going back." "I'm sure. They've had 24 hours to come clean and make restitution. Instead, Beth's been moving money between accounts, and John's been calling in favors to make this whole thing disappear." "How do you know that?" I showed her my phone, which was displaying real-time surveillance footage from 3 different locations. "I've been tracking their movements since yesterday." Beth went to 2 different banks and met with 3 lawyers. John had lunch with the city councilman and spent an hour at the courthouse looking at property records. They're not planning to cooperate. They're planning to run, which means we need to move fast. Nate Kowalski arrived next, looking uncomfortable in his only suit. He'd been my crew chief for 5 years, a solid, reliable man who knew more about electrical systems than most engineers. More importantly, he was loyal, and he'd been as angry as anyone when he learned about the theft. "You sure you need me here, Jim? I'm not good with this legal stuff. I need witnesses, Nate. People who can testify that they heard Beth and John confess to embezzlement. They're going to confess. Oh yes, they're definitely going to confess." At exactly 3 o'clock, Beth and John arrived, followed by Amir and another man I didn't recognize. The stranger was tall, well-dressed, and had the kind of predatory confidence that screamed federal prosecutor or mob lawyer. "Jim," Beth said coldly, "I see you've brought your own audience." "Just some interested parties. Connie's here as a potential investor in Parish Electric's future. Nate's here as a representative of the employees who've been affected by recent financial irregularities." The stranger stepped forward. "I'm Marcus Webb, representing Miss Tate and Mr. Tate in this matter. I understand there have been some accusations made regarding company finances." "Not accusations, facts, documented, provable facts." I spread a series of documents across the conference table. Bank statements, canceled checks, deposit records, and a timeline that showed exactly how Beth and John had systematically looted Parish Electric over 18 months. $237,000, I said. "That's the total amount diverted from company accounts to personal use. Would you like me to walk through the details?" Marcus Webb examined the documents with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen plenty of financial crimes. His expression didn't change, but I saw him make a note on his legal pad. "These documents appear to show normal business expenses," he said finally. "Normal business expenses? Like this check for $15,000 to Cascade Construction Supply, followed by a $15,000 refund that went directly into John's personal account." "That was a legitimate business transaction," John said. "We ordered materials, then canceled the order when the job specifications changed." "Really? Because I called Cascade Construction Supply yesterday. They have no record of any order from Parish Electric in the past 2 years." John's face went pale. Beth grabbed his arm, probably trying to keep him from saying something stupid. Or how about this series of payments to Northwest Equipment Rental? $23,000 over 6 months for equipment that was never delivered to any parish electric job site. I pulled out another document. Northwest Equipment Rental is a shell company registered in Delaware. The sole owner is listed as Elizabeth Parrish. That's you, Beth. Marcus Webb was taking notes furiously now. This wasn't the simple he said, she said dispute he'd been expecting. Furthermore, I continued, I have security footage of John breaking into the parish electric warehouse 3 nights ago, attempting to destroy financial records. That's obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and criminal trespass. You can't use that footage, Amir said. It was obtained illegally. Actually, it wasn't. The surveillance system was installed with proper notification to all employees, and the warehouse is private property owned by Parish Electric. I have every right to monitor my own building. I activated my laptop and showed them the footage. John, clearly visible, stuffing documents into garbage bags and attempting to destroy evidence. The timestamp shows this occurred at 2:47 a.m. on Tuesday night. What were you doing in the warehouse at that time, John? John looked at Marcus Webb, who shook his head slightly. Don't answer. Don't incriminate yourself further. But Beth wasn't as smart as her lawyer. He was retrieving personal property, things that belonged to him. Personal property? Like these financial records showing systematic embezzlement? I spread out more documents. Here's the real beauty of your scheme. You didn't just steal money. You created a paper trail that implicates both of you in money laundering, tax evasion, and wire fraud. Marcus Webb's pen stopped moving. Wire fraud was a federal crime, which meant federal prosecutors and federal prison time. The Cayman Islands accounts, Beth. Moving stolen money across international borders makes this a federal case. The FBI takes a very dim view of that kind of thing. We haven't moved any money to the Cayman Islands, Beth said quickly. Haven't you? Because I have records showing 3 wire transfers totaling $87,000 from your personal account to Meridian Financial Services in Georgetown. Meridian Financial Services is a shell company that exists solely to hide assets from U.S. tax authorities. That was a bluff, but it was a good one. Beth's face went white, and I knew I'd hit the target. How did you... She started, then stopped. How did I find out? Beth, I spent 20 years in military intelligence. I know how to track money, how to identify shell companies, and how to build cases that will stand up in federal court. Marcus Webb closed his briefcase. I think this meeting is over. Actually, it's just getting started, because I haven't told you about the best part yet. I pulled out a final document. This morning, I filed a complaint with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. They're very interested in cases involving international money laundering and tax evasion. You fool, Beth hissed. Oh, but there's more. I also filed complaints with the IRS, the State Tax Authority, and the Washington State Attorney General's office. Turns out when you steal $250,000 and hide it in offshore accounts, you create tax liabilities that compound very quickly. I did some quick math on my calculator. With penalties and interest, you're looking at approximately $400,000 in tax liability, plus criminal charges that carry sentences of up to 20 years in federal prison. The room was silent except for the sound of Marcus Webb's pen scratching on his legal pad. He was probably calculating his own liability for representing clients in a federal money laundering case. However, I continued, I'm a reasonable man. I'm prepared to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? Marcus Webb asked. Full restitution of all stolen funds, plus interest and penalties. Complete transfer of Beth's shares in Parish Electric to me for the nominal sum of $1. Immediate resignation of John from all positions with the company, and both of you disappear from my life permanently. And in return, I withdraw the federal complaints and handle this as a civil matter. No criminal charges, no federal investigation, no prison time. Beth and John exchanged glances. They were trapped, and they knew it. We need time to consider your offer, Marcus Webb said. You have 5 minutes. After that, the offer expires and you deal with the federal authorities. I started counting down from 300, just like I had in the warehouse. Psychological pressure, designed to force quick decisions and prevent careful consideration of alternatives. At 2 minutes and 15 seconds, Beth cracked. Fine, we accept your terms. But I want everything in writing, signed and notarized. Of course, Connie's prepared all the necessary documents. My sister opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of legal papers. Transfer agreements, promissory notes, resignation letters, and non-disclosure agreements. Sign here, here, and here, she said, pointing to signature lines. Initial here and here. Date everything. Beth and John signed the papers like condemned prisoners signing their own death warrants, which, in a way, they were. Excellent. Now, about those offshore accounts. Beth reluctantly provided account numbers and passwords. Within an hour, Connie had initiated wire transfers bringing all the hidden money back to U.S. accounts. $237,000, she confirmed, plus accrued interest. It's all here. I stood up and gathered the signed documents. Pleasure doing business with you. Oh, and one more thing. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app I'd been running throughout the meeting. Everything you've said here today has been recorded. Full confessions to embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. Insurance, in case you decide to cause problems in the future. Beth's face went from pale to green. You recorded us without consent? Actually, I did have consent. Washington is a one-party consent state, which means I only need one person's permission to record a conversation. I gave myself permission. Marcus Webb was already heading for the door, probably planning to send Beth and John a very expensive bill and then forget he'd ever met them. Wait, Beth called after him. What about our legal protections? You just confessed to multiple felonies on tape, he said without turning around. You're on your own. After they left, I sat in the shabby conference room with Connie and Nate, surrounded by signed documents that gave me everything I'd lost and more. That was beautiful, Jim, Nate said, like watching a masterclass in A-kicking. It's not over yet, I said. This was just the opening move. What do you mean? Connie asked. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Beth and John think they've lost a business and some money. They have no idea what they have actually lost, which is everything. Their reputations, their social standing, their future prospects, their ability to show their faces in this town ever again. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where I'd built my life, lost it, and now reclaimed it. Phase 1 was about getting my money back. Phase 2 is about making sure they understand the full cost of betraying someone who used to hunt people for a living. Jim, Connie said carefully, what exactly are you planning? I'm planning to give Beth and John exactly what they deserve. Complete and utter destruction served ice cold and absolutely legal. And then I'm going to watch them disappear into the obscurity they've earned. I gathered up the documents and headed for the door. Come on, we've got a business to rebuild and a reputation to restore. What about Beth and John? What about them? They're yesterday's problem. Today, we start building tomorrow. But as we walked out of the Riverside Motel, I was already planning the final phase of my revenge. Beth and John had stolen my money, my business, and my family. I'd gotten the money and business back. But they still had something that belonged to me, my daughters, my reputation, my peace of mind. It was time to collect on those debts as well. The annual Chamber of Commerce dinner was the social event of the year in our small city. Every business owner, city official, and community leader would be there, dressed in their finest clothes and ready to network, gossip, and see who was rising or falling in the local hierarchy. It was the perfect venue for what I had planned. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of documents. The hotel ballroom was already buzzing with conversation as people mingled over cocktails and appetizers. I recognized most of the faces, contractors I'd worked with, city officials who had approved our permits, business owners who had hired Parish Electric for their projects. Beth and John were there too, standing near the bar and trying to look confident. Beth wore an expensive dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, while John glad-handed anyone who would talk to him. They were putting on a brave face, but I could see the strain around their eyes. They knew what was coming, even if they didn't know exactly when or how. Jim, good to see you, man. Tommy Kozlowski, the plumber who'd helped spread my initial rumors, clapped me on the shoulder. Heard things are looking up for Parish Electric. Better than ever, Tommy. We just signed 3 new municipal contracts and hired 6 more electricians. That's great. And how are you handling the personal stuff? The divorce? It's been educational. Amazing what you learn about people when money's involved. I let that hang in the air while I sipped my drink. Tommy's eyes lit up with curiosity. Yeah? Learn anything interesting? Oh, you have no idea. The dinner bell rang, and everyone moved toward their assigned tables. I'd made sure to request a table near the front, close to the podium where the evening's speakers would address the crowd. The meal proceeded normally, rubber chicken, overcooked vegetables, and the kind of small talk that passes for conversation at business dinners. But I could feel the anticipation building. Word had spread that something was going to happen tonight, though nobody knew exactly what. After dessert, the evening's program began. The chamber president gave his annual address, followed by recognition of new members and retiring board members. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special presentation tonight. Jim Parrish of Parrish Electric has asked to address the chamber regarding recent developments in his business. I walked to the podium, carrying my briefcase and wearing my most professional smile. The room fell silent, 300 people waiting to hear what I had to say. Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you tonight about trust, betrayal, and the importance of protecting our business community from those who would exploit it. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. 3 months ago, I discovered that Parrish Electric had been the sufferer of systematic embezzlement. Over 18 months, approximately $240,000 had been stolen from company accounts through a sophisticated scheme involving fake vendors, fraudulent expense reports, and offshore money laundering. A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't the kind of speech people expected at a chamber dinner. The perpetrators of this crime were people I trusted completely, people who had access to company accounts, knowledge of our financial systems, and the ability to cover their tracks by destroying evidence. I could see Beth and John at their table looking like deer caught in headlights. They'd expected me to handle this quietly, privately, through lawyers and civil courts. They'd forgotten that I preferred more direct approaches. The investigation revealed a pattern of financial manipulation that went far beyond simple theft. Money was moved through shell companies, hidden in offshore accounts, and used to fund expensive lifestyles that couldn't be supported by legitimate income. I pulled out a series of enlarged photographs, bank statements, canceled checks, wire transfer records. These documents tell the story of how trusted employees systematically looted a successful business, endangering the jobs of dozens of workers and the financial security of their families. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was better than any soap opera or crime drama. But the most disturbing aspect of this case wasn't the theft itself. It was the elaborate plan to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, and frame innocent parties for crimes they didn't commit. I clicked a remote control and a large screen descended behind the podium. Security footage began playing, showing John breaking into the Parrish Electric warehouse and attempting to destroy financial records. This footage shows one of the perpetrators, recorded 3 weeks ago, committing obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence in an attempt to cover up their crimes. The crowd gasped. Seeing actual criminal activity, recorded in high definition, made the whole story feel immediate and real. Fortunately, law enforcement was able to recover the evidence and build a solid case. The perpetrators have confessed to their crimes and agreed to make full restitution. I paused for effect, letting the tension build. I want to thank the business community for their support during this difficult time. Your loyalty and trust have helped Parrish Electric not just survive this attack, but emerge stronger than ever. Another pause, another chance for the crowd to absorb what they'd heard. However, I also want to warn you about the ongoing threat posed by financial predators who target successful businesses. These criminals are often people you know and trust. They may be employees, partners, or even family members who exploit their access to commit sophisticated white-collar crimes. I looked directly at Beth and John's table. They were both staring at their plates, unable to meet my eyes or anyone else's. The perpetrators in this case were my wife, Beth Parrish, and her brother, John Tate. They used their positions of trust to steal nearly $250,000, hide it in offshore accounts, and then attempt to frame me for their crimes when they were discovered. The crowd erupted in shocked conversation. This wasn't just a business presentation anymore. It was a public execution. Both have confessed to embezzlement, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. They've agreed to make full restitution and resign from all positions with Parrish Electric. I clicked the remote again, and the screen showed copies of the signed confession documents. I'm sharing this information with you tonight because these individuals may attempt to start new businesses or seek employment with other companies in our community. I believe you have the right to know about their criminal history before you make any decisions about doing business with them. Beth stood up abruptly, her face red with rage and humiliation. This is slander. You can't... Actually, Mrs. Parrish, everything I've said tonight is documented fact, supported by physical evidence and your own signed confession. Truth is an absolute defense against slander. She started to respond, but John grabbed her arm and pulled her back down. He knew they were trapped, completely exposed, with no way to fight back. In closing, I want to assure everyone that Parish Electric has fully recovered from this attack. We've implemented new financial controls, hired additional staff, and expanded our services. We're stronger than ever, and we're committed to serving this community with integrity and professionalism. I gathered my documents and smiled at the crowd. Thank you for your attention, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was watching Beth and John, seeing the exact moment when they realized their lives in this town were over. They couldn't show their faces at the country club, couldn't attend business meetings, couldn't even go to the grocery store without people whispering about them. Their social standing, their professional reputations, their entire identities had been destroyed in 15 minutes of devastating truth-telling. As I walked back to my table, people reached out to shake my hand, pat my back, and offer their support. The business community was rallying around me, which meant they were turning against Beth and John. "Jim, that took guts," said Mayor Peterson. "We need more business leaders willing to stand up to white-collar crime." "Just doing my civic duty, Mr. Mayor." "Well, you can count on the city's full support. And if you need any help with new contracts or permits, my door's always open." I thanked him and continued toward my table, accepting congratulations and offers of support from dozens of people. By the time I sat down, Beth and John's table was empty. They'd fled, unable to face the crowd that now knew exactly what they were. Connie leaned over and whispered, "That was brutal. Effective, but brutal. They earned it." What happens now? I looked around the ballroom at the faces of people who'd known Beth and John for years, but would now see them only as criminals and traitors. Now they disappear. They'll have to leave town, start over somewhere else, probably under different names. Their reputations are destroyed, their business connections are gone, and everyone they know will remember them as thieves and liars. "And you? What do you do now?" I smiled, feeling truly relaxed for the first time in months. "Now I rebuild. Parish Electric is mine again, completely and permanently. I've got my money back, my business back, and my reputation restored. Beth and John are finished, not just here, but anywhere they try to go. Word travels fast in the business world. What about your daughters?" "The custody hearing is next week. Beth's criminal record and financial instability won't look good to a family court judge. I expect to get full custody with minimal visitation rights for her." I stood up and straightened my tie. "Come on, let's go home. Tomorrow we start the next chapter." As we walked out of the hotel, I saw Beth and John in the parking lot, arguing next to John's truck. They were probably trying to figure out where to go, what to do, how to salvage something from the wreckage of their lives. They looked up as I passed, and for a moment our eyes met. I saw fear there, and hatred, and the dawning realization that their nightmare was just beginning. "This isn't over," Beth said. I stopped and turned back to her. "Yes, Beth, it really is. You gambled everything on a scheme to destroy me and steal my life. You lost. Completely, permanently, and publicly. We'll fight back. You'll what? Sue me for telling the truth? Start a new business with your criminal records? Try to rebuild your reputations after confessing to felonies in front of 300 witnesses?" I shook my head. "You're done, both of you. Finished. And the beautiful thing is, you did it to yourselves. Every choice, every crime, every lie that led to this moment was your decision." I started to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and Beth, don't bother trying to contact Emma and Sarah. They'll be living with me full-time now, and they don't need to be around people who steal money and lie to federal investigators." "You fool." "No, Beth, I'm just someone who's very good at playing the long game. You taught me that patience and planning beat impulse and greed every time." I walked to my car, leaving them standing in the parking lot with nothing but each other and the wreckage of their own making. As I drove home, I thought about the past 6 months. The betrayal, the investigation, the careful planning, and tonight's devastating conclusion. Beth and John had tried to destroy me, and instead, they destroyed themselves. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect. My phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the display. "Hi, sweetheart." "Daddy, Mommy's crying. And Uncle John is yelling, 'Are you coming to get us?' "I'll be there in 20 minutes, baby. Pack your things. You're coming home." "For good?" "For good." I hung up and pressed harder on the accelerator. My daughters were waiting, my business was thriving, and my enemies were vanquished. Sometimes revenge really was a dish best served cold. Tonight it had been ice cold, and I dined like a king.